In a world where the very fabric of humanity began with just two people, the story of Cain's wife unfolds like a hidden chapter in the Bible. In the biblical narrative, the story of Cain is both intriguing and perplexing. It reveals that Cain's wife was, in fact, his sister. Now, this might raise a few eyebrows today, but back in those early days, it made perfect sense. The directive given by God to fill the earth meant that, to populate the world, siblings would need to marry. After all of humanity traces its roots back to Adam and Eve. This foundational truth sets the stage for understanding how the early generations functioned socially and biologically. As we consider this scenario, it's essential to remember the context of the time. Humanity was just beginning, and the population was minimal. In such a setting, the necessity of sibling marriages was not only practical, but also divinely ordained. The Bible highlights this unique arrangement without delving into the moral complexities we associate with it today. Instead, it presents a straightforward picture of survival and growth, where familial bonds were crucial for the continuation of life on Earth. Interestingly, the relationship dynamics of Cain and his wife illustrate a world vastly different from our own. In those early days, the bonds of kinship were paramount, and the implications of such unions were viewed through a different lens. It was a time when the focus was on fulfilling God's commandments rather than societal norms. The biblical text offers a glimpse into a society where the concept of family took on an entirely new meaning, devoid of the connotations we attach to it in modern times. This understanding challenges us to rethink our perspectives on relationships. What seemed taboo or problematic in contemporary society was simply a necessity for the first humans. The simplicity of their existence starkly contrasts with the complexities we navigate today. It begs the question of how we define relationships and the moral frameworks we create around them, especially when they originate from ancient texts. In the early days of humanity, the concept of incest was not viewed with the same apprehension that we hold today. Back then, the genetic makeup of Adam and Eve was pristine, free from mutations that would later complicate human genetics. This initial perfection created a context where marrying close relatives was not only acceptable, but essential for population growth. The idea of genetic health in the early generations was fundamentally different, as human DNA was untainted and robust. As generations progressed, the situation began to shift. With the introduction of sin into the world, humanity's genetic perfection started to deteriorate. This decline had profound implications, affecting not only the physical health of individuals, but also the moral fabric of society. The increase in sin led to a greater need for boundaries, and what was once permissible began to be seen as problematic. This gradual shift formed the backdrop for the eventual prohibitions against incest. The implications of this genetic decline cannot be understated. As humanity continued to multiply, the consequences of close relative marriages began to surface. It was a clear indication that the initial conditions of creation were changing, and with it, the health and well-being of future generations were at stake. The biblical narrative reflects this transition, showing how the once acceptable practices became increasingly scrutinized as the world became more complex and sinful. As we explore this topic, it's crucial to consider the societal norms of the time. The early humans lived in a world devoid of the scientific understanding we possess today. They did not have the knowledge of genetics, heredity, or the potential consequences of their actions. What seemed benign in the beginning later became a cause for concern as the genetic implications of incestuous relationships became evident. In the biblical narrative, marriages between relatives were not only common, but also accepted. Take, for example, the union of Abraham and Sarah. They were half-siblings, sharing the same father, and their marriage is often highlighted as a significant part of God's covenant with Abraham. This kind of relationship was seen as a means to preserve the family line and fulfill divine promises. Similarly, Isaac married Rebekah, who was a relative, further illustrating that these types of unions were woven into the fabric of biblical history. Another compelling case is that of Jacob, who married both Leah and Rachel, sisters from the same family. This relationship showcases a common practice of marrying within the family to strengthen ties and ensure the continuation of lineage. Under the cultural and religious context of the time, these marriages were not viewed through the lens of modern taboos. Instead, they were seen as practical and necessary for the survival of the family unit. As the narrative unfolds, these unions often lead to significant events that shape the course of Israel's history. It's essential to note that the understanding of kinship has evolved over time. What was once permissible in the early biblical context has changed dramatically in contemporary society. The marriages mentioned in the Bible were not classified as incestuous, according to the laws that would later be established in the Mosaic Law. This highlights a significant shift in moral and ethical standards throughout biblical history, reflecting the changing relationship humans have with the divine and with one another. As the biblical story progresses, it becomes clear that these early marriages served a purpose. They helped establish tribes, clans, and nations, laying the groundwork for the people of Israel. These familial connections were critical in a time when survival depended heavily on cooperation and solidarity among kin. Thus, the marriages among relatives, while unconventional by today's standards, played a vital role in the unfolding narrative of God's people. The Bible does not shy away from addressing the consequences of incestuous relationships, which, over time, brought about dire repercussions. Early on, the notion of marrying close relatives was acceptable, but as humanity grew more sinful, the ramifications of these unions became increasingly evident. For instance, the offspring of such unions often faced severe challenges, ranging from genetic disorders to societal strife. This deterioration prompted a divine response, leading to the establishment of laws aimed at protecting the health and well-being of future generations. Consider the story of Lot and his daughters, which serves as a poignant example of the chaos that ensues from incestuous relationships. After the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot's daughters, believing they were the last people on earth, resorted to incest to preserve their family line. The results were disastrous, illustrating how such actions can lead to moral decay and societal issues. These narratives highlight that while these relationships may have been socially acceptable at one time, they ultimately resulted in a cascade of negative outcomes. Moreover, the biblical accounts often link incestuous relationships with curses and divine wrath. The consequences felt by the families involved serve as cautionary tales about the dangers of straying from God's intended design for relationships. As a result, the establishment of laws against incest served not only to protect individual families, but also to maintain the sanctity and health of the community as a whole. The deterioration of moral standards and the rise of violence within families were additional consequences of these relationships. The biblical text often reveals a correlation between close familial unions and the emergence of conflict, betrayal, and violence. As the narrative develops, it becomes clear that the integrity of familial relationships is crucial for the overall stability of society. God's laws against incest were therefore a protective measure aimed at preserving the health and sanctity of his people. Ultimately, the shift away from accepting incestuous relationships in biblical law underscores the importance of moral guidance in nurturing healthy communities. The consequences of these early unions serve as a stark reminder that while humanity may have once operated under different standards, the evolution of divine law reflects a deeper understanding of human relationships and their far-reaching implications. By establishing boundaries, God sought to protect his people from the perils that arise when these boundaries are crossed. Despite the sin committed by Cain, God showed remarkable mercy by protecting him after he killed his brother Abel. This act of protection is often seen as a powerful testament to divine grace, illustrating that God's love extends even to those who falter. Cain was marked not as a punishment, but as a sign of God's commitment to him. This reflects a deeper theological principle, that no one is beyond redemption, and even those who err can still find a place in God's plan. Cain's descendants went on to play significant roles in the development of early civilization. While Cain himself is often remembered for his transgression, his lineage contributed to advancements in agriculture, music, and metallurgy. The story suggests that, despite moral failings, there is potential for growth and progress. This duality in Cain's legacy sparks discussions about the nature of humanity, how we can be capable of both great good and profound evil. Moreover, the narrative emphasizes that all humans share a common ancestry. The fact that everyone ultimately descends from Adam and Eve implies a shared heritage, fostering a sense of unity among people. This idea challenges the notion of superiority based on lineage or accomplishments, reminding us that regardless of our paths, we are connected by our origins. In a way, Cain's story serves as a reminder of the complexities of human nature and the intricate weave of our collective history. The mercy shown to Cain also raises questions about justice and consequence. While his actions had dire repercussions, the protection he received highlights a significant aspect of divine governance: mercy intertwined with justice. This balance serves as a foundation for understanding how God interacts with humanity. It teaches that while there are consequences for our actions, there is always room for mercy, which is a core tenet in many religious traditions. In summary, the legacy of Cain is multifaceted, characterized by themes of mercy, shared humanity, and the potential for growth despite moral failings. This narrative encourages reflection on the complexities of human nature and the possibility of redemption. It reminds readers that even in darkness, there can be light, and that our origins bind us together in ways that transcend individual actions. As we reflect on the story of Cain and his wife, it's fascinating to consider the complex dynamics at play in early human history. Picture this: a world where the lines of familial relationships were drawn differently, a time when the very fabric of humanity was being woven by just a few. It's a stark reminder of how far we've come and the moral frameworks that guide us today. But let's think about this. How do the choices made by our ancestors shape our understanding of family and relationships now? What lessons can we draw from Cain's journey? Despite his grave mistake, God's mercy was evident, showing us that redemption is always possible, even in the face of grave sin. As you ponder these questions, consider the implications of Cain's legacy. What does it mean for us to recognize our shared origins? How can we apply these teachings in our lives today? Remember, the stories in the Bible are not just ancient tales. They resonate with our modern experiences, reminding us of the strength found in community and the importance of making wise choices. So what's next in your own story? How can you embrace the lessons of the past to shape a brighter future? Keep exploring, keep questioning, and let's continue this journey together.